In the early hours of September 2nd, 1666, as a pale dawn crept over the city, London slept, unaware of the catastrophe about to unfold. The city's narrow, winding streets were silent, the air heavy with the scent of wood smoke and the promise of another ordinary day. But in Thomas Farriner's bakery on Pudding Lane, a single spark leapt from the oven, igniting a disaster that would become legendary. The bakery, filled with flour dust and dry timber, was a tinderbox waiting for a match. The Farriner family, startled awake by the growing flames, scrambled desperately to escape. They managed to flee through an upstairs window onto the roof, but their terrified maid, paralyzed by fear, could not follow. She became the fire's first tragic victim, a haunting reminder of how quickly disaster can strike. At first the fire seemed minor, just another blaze in a city built of timber and thatch, where small fires were a common hazard. Many Londoners believed it would soon be brought under control. The Lord Mayor, Sir Thomas Bloodworth, was summoned to the scene. After a brief look, he famously dismissed the danger, scoffing that a woman might piss it out, and returned to bed, leaving the city vulnerable to fate. This complacency, shared by many, allowed the fire to grow unchecked. The flames, fanned by a strong easterly wind, leapt from house to house, feeding on the city's tightly packed wooden buildings. With no organized fire brigade, only parish volunteers armed with buckets, axes, and sheer determination stood between London and the inferno. Their efforts were valiant but hopelessly inadequate against the growing blaze. The fire quickly found fuel in the bakery's dry wood, flour sacks, and barrels of oil. It spread with terrifying speed, leaping across rooftops and devouring entire streets before dawn had fully broken. For 4 relentless days, the fire raged, consuming more than 13,000 houses, countless businesses, and iconic landmarks like St. Paul's Cathedral. The city's heart was reduced to smoldering ruins. Official records claimed few lives were lost, but the true toll was hidden in the chaos. Families torn apart, livelihoods destroyed, and a city forever changed by the devastation. The Great Fire was not just a disaster, it was a turning point. Out of the ashes, Londoners would find resilience, unity, and the determination to rebuild stronger than before. What began as a simple oversight in a humble bakery would forever alter the fate of London, shaping the city's future for generations to come. London in 1666 was a sprawling, bustling metropolis, but beneath its lively surface the city was a disaster waiting to happen. Its streets twisted and turned in a confusing maze, lined with wooden houses that leaned precariously over the narrow lanes below. These overhanging upper stories created a canopy of timber, making it all too easy for a single spark to leap from one rooftop to the next, setting off a chain reaction of destruction. Most buildings were constructed almost entirely from wood, with timber frames and walls made of wattle and daub, a mixture of sticks and clay that dried into a brittle, flammable shell. Roofs were often thatched or shingled, adding yet another layer of tinder to the city's skyline. These materials, chosen for their low cost and ease of construction, made the city beautiful but dangerously vulnerable. Open flames were a constant presence in daily life. People cooked their meals over open hearths, lit their homes with candles and oil lamps, and heated their rooms with blazing fires. Warehouses and shops were packed with barrels of oil, tar, pitch, and spirits. Highly flammable goods stored in the heart of the city, just waiting for an accident. The summer of 1666 had been unusually long and dry, baking the city and its buildings until they were as brittle as kindling. Grass, wood, and even the earth itself were parched, making the entire city a tinderbox ready to ignite at the slightest provocation. On the night the fire began, a fierce easterly wind swept through the city, fanning the flames and carrying burning embers high above the rooftops. These embers rained down on distant buildings, igniting new fires far from the original blaze and overwhelming any hope of containing the inferno. Water, the city's best defense against fire, was in short supply. London's water pipes were made of wood, and as the fire spread, many of these pipes burned or burst, cutting off vital supplies. Access to the River Thames, the city's main water source, was blocked by warehouses and crowded riverside buildings, making it nearly impossible for firefighters to reach the water they so desperately needed. The city's population was packed into cramped, unsanitary quarters. Overcrowding made it difficult for people to escape quickly, and the maze-like streets became choked with panicked residents and their belongings. For many, there was simply nowhere to run. London's very design, its dense layout, flammable materials, and unpredictable weather, combined to create a perfect storm. Every element, from architecture to climate, seemed to conspire against the city's safety. In the end, London was a city built to burn. When the fire finally came, it swept through the streets with terrifying speed, taking full advantage of every weakness. The disaster that followed was not simply a matter of bad luck. It was the inevitable result of centuries of risky choices, decisions made for convenience, profit, or tradition, with little thought for the dangers they created. The stage was set for catastrophe, and all it took was a single spark to unleash one of the greatest disasters in London's history. By Sunday morning, the fire had become an unstoppable force, its fury magnified by strong, unpredictable winds that whipped the flames higher and farther than anyone could have imagined. The blaze found new fuel in the warehouses lining the Thames, packed with flammable goods like oil, timber, and spirits, which ignited in rapid succession and sent sheets of fire leaping across the riverfront. Desperate efforts to halt the inferno, using firehooks to pull down houses and create fire breaks, proved far too slow and disorganized to make a difference. Many property owners, terrified of losing their homes and possessions, resisted evacuation and even sabotaged attempts to demolish buildings, causing fatal delays that allowed the fire to spread unchecked. The Lord Mayor's indecision and lack of leadership left the city in chaos, with no clear direction as the flames advanced relentlessly through the narrow streets. Explosions from barrels of oil and spirits stored in the riverside warehouses sent fireballs and burning debris high into the sky, raining destruction on everything below. The heat grew so intense that it melted the lead roof of St. Paul's Cathedral, sending molten metal streaming down the walls and igniting the ancient timbers within. The firestorm became a living force, generating its own winds that sucked people, animals, and debris into the heart of the blaze, making escape nearly impossible for many. On London Bridge, houses burned fiercely, but in a twist of fate, their destruction created a firebreak that spared the district of Southwark from the worst of the flames. The inferno swept through the city's financial heart, reducing the Royal Exchange and the bustling markets of Cheapside to smoldering ruins. Bucket chains and lines of residents passing wet cloths and buckets were tragically ineffective against the overwhelming power of the fire. Only when King Charles II personally intervened, organizing soldiers and citizens into coordinated teams, did a real firefighting effort begin to take shape. But by then, much of the city's heart and history had already been reduced to ashes and smoldering ruins. The fire's relentless advance exposed the city's vulnerability, its wooden buildings, narrow lanes, and lack of preparation all contributing to the disaster. Londoners could only watch in horror as their homes, businesses, and memories were consumed by a force of nature beyond their control. As the city burned, its fate hung in the balance, and the world watched to see if London would ever rise from the ashes. Samuel Pepys, a naval administrator, chronicled the fire's chaos in his diary, giving us a vivid, personal account. He watched from the Tower of London, describing the flames as most horrid, malicious, bloody. Pepys recorded the panicked streets jammed with people and carts, desperate to save their belongings. He noted pigeons refusing to flee, burning their wings, a small but powerful image of the tragedy. Pepys personally warned King Charles II, urging him to order houses pulled down to stop the fire. His diary captures both the failures of leadership and the heroism of ordinary people. Through Pepys's eyes, the Great Fire becomes a story of fear, survival, and the instinct to protect what matters most. The official death toll of the Great Fire, fewer than 10, defies belief. In reality, many victims, especially the poor and marginalized, were never counted. The fire's heat was so intense it could cremate bodies completely, leaving no trace. Chaos and the urgent need to help survivors meant no thorough count was possible. Archaeological evidence suggests the true toll was likely in the hundreds, if not thousands. The low number reflects who was considered important enough to record, not the true scale of loss. The real tragedy lies in the forgotten lives lost to the flames. By the third day, civic leaders were overwhelmed, and panic gripped the city. King Charles II and his brother, James, Duke of York, took command, riding into the city to direct the fight. The king authorized the use of gunpowder to demolish buildings and create fire breaks, an aggressive but necessary tactic. Navy sailors blew up rows of houses, finally halting the fire's advance. The battle reached its peak as the flames threatened Fleet Street and Whitehall. A sudden change in the wind slowed the fire, and the man-made barriers held. By Wednesday, the blaze was contained, though smaller fires smoldered for days. The king's leadership, the navy's expertise, and a lucky shift in weather saved what remained of London. The city was battered, but the worst was over. London had survived, but at a tremendous cost. When the smoke cleared, London was a wasteland. Over 13,000 homes and 87 churches gone. Up to 80,000 people were left homeless, camping in fields outside the city. The authorities faced a massive humanitarian crisis: feeding, sheltering, and protecting the displaced. Fear and suspicion spread, with foreigners and Catholics blamed for the fire. Mob violence erupted, and a Frenchman, Robert Hubert, was executed as a scapegoat. The king worked to restore order, prevent riots, and organize relief. Clearing the ruins was a monumental task. Smoldering cellars and rubble blocked the streets. The city's future was uncertain, and recovery would take years. London was on its knees, but its people were determined to rebuild. The fire's aftermath was as challenging as the blaze itself. In the wake of the fire, Londoners saw a chance to build a safer, healthier city. Grand plans by Christopher Wren envisioned wide boulevards and a rational grid, but property disputes made radical change impossible. The city was rebuilt mostly on its old street plan, but with crucial improvements. New laws required brick or stone construction, wooden frames and overhanging upper stories were banned. Streets were widened and dangerous trades moved out of the center. These were the first modern building codes in London. Rebuilding took over a decade, transforming the city's look and feel. Wren rebuilt 51 churches and designed the new St. Paul's Cathedral, giving London a new skyline. The city that rose from the ashes was stronger, safer, and more unified. The fire had forced London to reinvent itself. The Great Fire was a tragedy, but it sparked lasting change. New building codes made London safer, and the world's first fire insurance company was born. The city's reconstruction improved public health with wider streets, better sewers, and less crowded housing. The monument to the Great Fire and Wren's St. Paul's Cathedral became symbols of resilience. The fire swept away the medieval city, paving the way for a modern commercial capital. Innovations in urban planning, safety, and finance shaped London's future. The disaster tested the city's spirit, but Londoners responded with resilience and vision. The fire's true legacy is not just destruction, but creation, a city reborn from its own ashes. London emerged stronger, better prepared, and ready for its role as a global city. The untold story of the fire is one of transformation and hope.